Hello and good morning, and for today's devotional we thought we would share a story or a testimony that we have that was very dramatic in our lives about 10 years ago. So in 2009 we had just spent 5 years helping establish Beacon Church as a church plant into the southern part of London, and in 2009 we felt that God had very strongly spoken to us about moving to Brazil and to get involved in establishing a church in Rio de Janeiro. And because of this I had managed to get a job out in Rio de Janeiro, and I had already planned for us to leave my job in December of that year, and we were planning to move out to Brazil in January of 2010. But this particular story starts in October of 2009. What happened next?
Well, one night, in the middle of the night, I had a stroke. I didn't realise that that's what had happened to me. And I woke up the next morning and went to go and pick up my eldest son, who was a toddler at the time, and realised that I couldn't do it. I didn't have any strength in my right arm or in the right side of my body, but I just assumed that I'd got a trapped nerve in my neck or something, and as the day passed it would clear itself, but it didn't. So I made an appointment with my GP and went to see him. I actually drove to the surgery. I don't know how I managed to do that with one hand, but I managed to drive there, and as soon as he examined me he said, I'm calling you an ambulance, you've had a stroke. So that was quite shocking, because we were booked to fly to Rio in 3 months, but I believe that God still wanted us to do that. So even though it took some time to recover from that, I had to learn how to walk again, how to hold a pencil again and write. I had to learn how to type on the computer again, even how to speak properly. Again, I had headaches that I had to have medication for as well. And our pastor at the time came and said to us, surely you're not still planning on going to Brazil now that this has happened. But we felt that it was still what God wanted us to do. So we still went ahead and planned for that. And another thing that we felt that God had said would happen is that we would have another child. And so when they were doing lots of tests to find out why I'd had the stroke, I said to the doctors, am I going to be able to have another baby, after this? And they said, well, we really don't know. When you get to Brazil, you're going to need to speak to the staff there, the medical staff there, and see if they are happy for you to go ahead with that. So it was a real unknown to us at that point, but we felt convinced that God wanted us to have another baby.
And then I kind of pick up the story is we had moved to Brazil, and I think it was in about May or June of 2011, and Suzanne was pregnant with Joshua here, and we were called in by one of the doctors, and he said, look, I'm not going to charge you for this. Doctors in Brazil often charge you hundreds of pounds for even an hour consultation. But he actually called us both in, sat us down and said to us that he didn't recommend us to go ahead with the birth because Suzanne's life was at serious risk from doing so. To which Suzanne's response was?
Well, it was considered a high-risk pregnancy, so we had a whole team of people who were working with us. And I said, well, we're going to go ahead. The baby's fine. I know that God's called us to have another child. So we're just going to trust God, and, we know that he's going to look after us. We were also due to fly back to the UK, and the doctor was very worried and concerned about that. And she said, if you're going to do that, then you're going to need to take this drug for the next few months. You're going to need to inject yourself with it every night before you go to sleep. When you get to the airport, before you get on the aeroplane, you need to inject yourself with it again. And you need to, be very mindful of things like preeclampsia and high blood pressure. So you need to take this drug because we're worried that, you're going to end up ill and the baby's going to suffer. And it was all a bit of a panic, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. But then fast forward to September the 29th, 2011. I remember the day very vividly. It was in the morning. I remember coming back into my office at school, and my phone was ringing, and it was Suzanne on the phone and saying, I've gone into labour. And so at which point I had to literally drop everything, run outside onto the street and grab a taxi taking me back to the apartment. And when I got back to the apartment, Suzanne was quite clearly in the throes of child labour, and so we had to go down and grab a taxi again. And if you know anything about Rio de Janeiro, it's incredibly busy, and it was a very hot, sunny day, and Suzanne was well into the throes of childbirth, and we managed to haul down this rather grubby old yellow taxi and get into the back, and then we got stuck in traffic in the region of Botafogo, and it felt like it took forever to get into the taxi.
Well, it felt like that for you.
It felt like for me. Yeah, exactly, even slightly worse for Suzanne. And can you remember that taxi journey?
Let me see. Basically, like the fluids had just come out everywhere on the back seat. The driver was just like having kittens. He's like, my taxi! But eventually we got to the hospital, and everybody was just very laid back when we got there and taking everything in their stride, because Brazil has the highest rate of caesareans in the world. No one has a natural birth. So when we arrived there, they just couldn't believe that I was having a natural birth. They was like, well, when's your baby due? What time is it supposed to come out? It's like, it's coming now. So it was a panic, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. But then the birth went well, and as soon as Joshua arrived, I felt God saying, he is going to be called Joshua. And here he is, as God's gift. And we just wanted to share this story as a great way of just remembering and reminding ourselves of when God has spoken, and when God has provided, even through difficult times. He has truly blessed and continues to bless. And I just want to finish by turning to Deuteronomy 16, because in Deuteronomy 16, God very clearly speaks to Moses instructions to the Israelites about how they're going to conduct their lives. And the key point is to set up times to remember what God had already done in the past. So I'll read this very simple verse where it says, so that you may remember all the days of your life, the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. And what was established was the feasts of Passover and the Feast of Weeks and the Feasts of Booths. And the idea of all these festivals was to remember what God had done for the nation of Israel, and to give thanks to God repeatedly for what he has already done for them in the past. And I believe that makes no difference to today. I think we should look back over our lives and remember what God has done in our lives and give thanks. So hopefully today you can think back over some amazing events that maybe you have in your life, of how God has answered prayer or helped you through very challenging times just like us, and has actually brought you through so that you can give thanks. Thanks for listening. Bye.